Its soft tortilla beckons me. Its oil-kissed exterior pleases the eyes. The aroma of steak, cheese, and salsa is almost as intoxicating as the smell of the desert when first touched by the rains of the monsoon. A staple of the Arizona border towns, a cultural food icon, and a favorite of a red and black-clad potty-mouth superhero. I am, of course, speaking of the chimichanga. Welcome to episode 4 of Unstructured with YoungYoda. Time to make the chimichangas. Just as a prologue before I get into the meat and rice of this episode, this week has been quite a terrible one for all of us. I originally was going to speak on the topic of political parties trying to correlate video games and increased violence. From what I've seen, there are many others taking up the banner to defend video games and video game culture and making far better arguments than I ever could for them. Being an avid gamer, I just have to say that these empty arguments and politicians grasping at the wrong straws has been around since the Tipper Gore era in the 1980s and will forever be unfounded theories that look to take the attention off the actual problem. So, I decided not to look at certain topics and stick to something that could be seen as funny and allow our brains to take a break from what we hear on the news or see on social media during the day for just a little bit. I think that's one of the largest reasons I decided to become a co-host/host on the Nerd Course, was for me to take a break on all the stressful things going on in my life to talk with my friends about topics I enjoy. And I hope listening to myself and all the other great people on this podcast feed also helps you to be able to take a break from the stress you're feeling. So, with that said, I guess on to the chimichangas. So, upon research of the chimi, there have been multiple histories told about who was first to create this divine gift from the deep fryer. What's Cooking America goes into detail, stating, chimichanga, or chimi, has achieved cult status in Tucson. The chimichanga is a Mexican-American fusion large burrito, prepared with a choice of meat, vegetables, and spices, deep fried to a golden perfection, and served on a bed of lettuce with cheese and mild sauce. The residents of Tucson take their chimis very seriously and prefer large overstuffed versions. Every restaurant and mom-and-pop eatery has its own version of the favorite dish. The Southwest is well known for its delicious Mexican food, and the residents of Tucson, Arizona boldly proclaim that their city, the Mexican food capital of the U.S., the city has its own version of Tex-Mex food, which it calls Arizona Sonoran cuisine. Because southern Arizona was once part of the Mexican state of Sonora, this style is considered the soul food of Arizona. So, on the history of the chimichanga, there are two theories. The first, of course, being my favorite, and probably the more well-known. In 1922, at the El Charro Cafe in Tucson, Monica Flynn, the owner, was busy cooking up a burrito for one of her customers. As she was making this, she accidentally dropped the massive tube of meat and tortilla into the deep fryer. Upon doing this, she had to stop herself from cursing up a storm due to the close proximity of the ears of her young nieces and nephews. Instead, uttered chimichanga, the Spanish equivalent of thingamajig or whatchamacallit. The fried burrito was delicious, the name stuck, and Tucson needed a food to bring to the tourists, calling Tucson the home of the chimichanga, and even putting an ad in Food and Wine magazine. I always love a good story, where what's thought of a fuck-up turns out to be a blessing. Like me. The other story circulating around isn't as glamorous and involved as a chef named Woody Johnson, who worked out of Macayo's Mexican restaurant in 1946 Phoenix. He would fry unsold burritos to serve the following day, and then sell them as toasted monkeys. I quote, toasted monkeys, that's what he called them. Apparently that's what people figured chimichanga meant, as the golden fried color resembled a toasted monkey. My only question is, why would anyone toast a monkey? And did someone at that restaurant do that and know what it looked like? Or is there an actual monkey called a toasted monkey? I didn't research that far. I've been sticking to the food portion of this aspect, so forgive me for that. The chimichanga is such a modern-day cultural icon that even the New York Times wrote an article about it in 2011 titled, Arizona's Vie to Claim Cross-Cultural Fried Food, even commenting on the complex origins of this fried burro, stating, uncertainty is part of the very essence of the chimi, as connoisseurs refer to it, since one is never sure exactly what a particular chimichanga contains, until one pokes through its crunchy flour shell with a fork and ferrets around inside. There are those who say the chimichanga, which can be stuffed with beef, chicken, pork, or even fish, and be swamped with cheese, sour cream, salsa, and guacamole, might have immigrated to Arizona from south of the border, which raises hackles in this state where immigration is so contentious an issue. But Mexicans do not tend to embrace the chimi as their own, even though chimichangas can be found on menus in northern Mexico, usually as chivichangas with a V. Much like the food produced at Taco Bell, the chimi is generally seen as an Americanized take on Mexican cuisine. Incidentally, Taco Bell, which has tried but failed to establish a foothold in Mexico, does not offer the chimichanga, although it does have the chalupa, which exists in Mexico and is a fried corn tostada with the sides turned up. And one signs of their popularity, Donald Beatty, a murderer who was put to death by lethal injection in Arizona in May, ordered a last meal the day before he died that consisted of a double cheeseburger with fries as well as a chimichanga. So, moral of the story for that last paragraph is, if it's good enough for a murderer, it's good enough for anyone. To continue along this line of popular culture and the golden burrito of goodness, let's talk about Deadpool, aka the Merc with the Mouth, aka Ryan Reynolds. I'm not afraid to admit it. Deadpool is a fave of mine in the world of Marvel and comics overall. He's unconventional, full of sass, is also a hell of a shot when he needs to be. I'm also holding out hope of a Spider-Man Deadpool team-up movie. And if you just heard that, you just heard Kevin Feige screaming, no, right at the exact moment when I said that team-up I hope would happen. Anyways, TVOverMind.com tackles the relationship of anti-hero and fried food in their article, What's the Deal with Deadpool and Chimichangas? It reads, Deadpool and chimichangas seem to go hand in hand like spaghetti and ketchup. Yeah, it's that weird sort of a connection when you really think about it. But the Merc with the Mouth is that weird kind of a guy that will say things that are so off the wall that you might find yourself doing a double, then triple take, wondering what in the world you just heard. Glad I wore my brown pants. As for his love of chimichangas, well, let's examine that a bit. He does manage to say the word a lot, doesn't he? He even plugs it into the movie in a way that makes you absolutely love the line and not want to forget it. But here's the trick. He doesn't even like chimichangas. Spoiler alert. You might want to dispute this, but the red-suited Merc actually admits it during one of the many comics he's found in. He loves saying the word, to be honest, and who can blame him? It is one of those words that seems to do the roll bounce up and down the tongue until it's finally past your lips. Deadpool is far from being the most conventional person in the Marvel Universe, and it shows every time he's on screen, every time he opens his mouth. So, thinking that he loves to say something instead of loving to eat it isn't really that hard to imagine, now is it? I probably dashed some dreams with this last bit of news, but just because Wade Wilson doesn't necessarily like chimichangas doesn't mean you can't absolutely fucking enjoy them. Hell, even Marvel markets the hell out of Deadpool enjoying chimi, and I, for one, will buy this shit out of all the Funko Pops and shirts I can get my hands on. Come on, Marvel. Keep releasing it. You know I want it. You know I want that chimi. That chimi fucking changa. And I will just say that I am a fan of the chimichanga, and most all Mexican dishes you put in front of me, be it the simple quesadilla or the burrito, to a bowl of menudo or abondigas. There is no place I would rather live than where I'm at on the Arizona border. It's my home with some of the greatest people from all races and from all walks of life. Coming together, in spite of our differences, makes us stronger, and we should all experience as many different cultures as we can. Now, on to the housekeeping. You can find me on Twitter at randomgerm101, but I would much prefer you give a follow to at the Nerd Course, _ which hosts this show and other great shows such as the Ladies in Nerd Course and the Impaired Files. Follow us on Instagram at the Nerd Course, and you can find all this information and more at our new website, www.thenerdcourse.com, where we even have blog posts. Yeah, Raul just did one on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, a great Quentin Tarantino movie that just was released in theaters. And I did one on Amazon's The Boys, the new superhero show where superheroes are basically assholes. So I hope you all enjoy both those posts. Both great reads. Go check that out at www.thenerdcourse.com. If you'd like to catch episodes on the Nerd Course podcast feed early or even get some extra goodies, be sure to sign up for our Patreon at www.patreon.com/thenerdcourse. With tiers starting as low as $1, you can help support this show and all the other shows on the podcast feed. Be sure to follow our executive producers, Grayson Barker, a.k.a. at Warlord Hitman 98 on Twitter, and our good friend Shane, who actually was just on an episode with us, one before this, where we talked about mid-90s, Jonah Hill's directorial debut. There's my dyslexia going on. But you can follow our friend Shane at twitch.tv/SRRKK or follow his Twitter at SRRKK Twitch. If you'd like to hear more from me, you can find me on the Nerd Course and the Gamer Course as co-host throughout the week. And I think I'll end this episode now with a quote from the man who taught many my age to embrace different people and different cultures, the late great Anthony Bourdain. If I'm an advocate for anything, it's to move as far as you can, as much as you can, across the ocean or simply across the river. Walk in someone else's shoes or at least eat their food. It's a plus for everybody. Rest in peace, Mr. Bourdain. Young Yoda out.